The night market of Zareth was cold and cruel, full of sharp voices and brighter lights than the stars above. Stalls were packed with alien merchants, shouting prices, waving strange foods, and laughing at desperate buyers. Yet, in the middle of this loud chaos, one corner was silent. There, a thin alien widow stood with her little girl shivering in the cold wind, her arms wrapped tightly around the child. The girl's lips were blue, her small frame trembling. Her stomach growled loud enough that even nearby strangers heard it. They looked once, then turned away, pretending not to notice. For many, hunger was normal. For many, poverty was a curse to be ignored. But tonight this widow had come with one last choice. Her clothes were worn, torn, patched too many times to count. They were all she had left to cover herself. No savings, no possessions, no family to lean on, only her daughter and her dignity. And now, even that dignity was cracking under the weight of hunger. The widow took a long, trembling breath, then slowly unwrapped the scarf from her shoulders. It was thin, faded, but still cloth, still worth something. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she pulled it off her back. The girl clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide with fear and shame. "Mama, don't," she whispered, her voice small and shaking, but the widow forced a weak smile. "For you, my little star," she said softly, bending down and kissing the girl's forehead. "For you to eat tonight." She stepped forward to the nearest stall. The merchant there was a fat creature with 6 eyes, his arms covered in golden rings. He looked at the scarf with disgust, then laughed. "This? Worthless rag, but—" He eyed the widow, smirked, and tossed a few crumbs of dry bread onto the counter. "For pity, I will trade." The widow lowered her eyes, ashamed but desperate. She handed over the scarf, bare shoulders shaking in the night air. The merchant snatched it, laughing as though he had won a game. The widow turned, holding the bread in her hands. The little girl reached for it instantly, her hunger stronger than her pride. She bit into the stale food, chewing quickly, crumbs falling on the dusty ground. Her eyes watered with relief even though the bread was hard and tasteless. The widow watched her, heartbreaking and healing at the same time. She had nothing left now. No clothes to trade, no items to sell. But at least tonight her daughter would not sleep on an empty stomach. Still, whispers rose in the market, voices of strangers cutting like knives. Look at her. Sold the clothes off her back. A widow. Shameful. Disgraceful. She won't last the week. Better if her child is taken. The widow heard every word. She kept her head low, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth, but her eyes burned with tears. She hated them for mocking her. She hated herself for letting it come to this. But what choice did she have? And then someone else was watching, not laughing, not whispering. Watching. In the shadow of an empty stall, a tall figure stood, not alien but human, his face half hidden by the hood of his jacket, his eyes sharp and heavy. He had been traveling through Zareth, a place where humans rarely walked. He had seen hunger before, he had seen cruelty. But tonight something inside him twisted at the sight of this mother and her child. He clenched his fists as the crowd mocked her, his jaw tight. He didn't move yet. He didn't speak. But he stayed, watching. The widow guided her girl toward the side of the market, hoping to find a place to sit, at least until the night passed. But the cold wind bit deeper now that her shoulders were bare. Her daughter leaned against her, too tired to stand. The bread was gone. One small piece was never enough. Hunger would return tomorrow, and tomorrow, she had nothing left to give. Her body shook. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer into the night. A prayer for help, for strength, for a miracle. Behind her, the human finally stepped out of the shadows. His boots crunched on the dust, the sound loud in the widow's ears. She turned her head quickly, her eyes wide with alarm. Strangers in the night often meant danger. Her arms tightened around her daughter, ready to protect her with the last of her strength. But the human said nothing. He only stood there watching, his face unreadable. In his hands, Something glimmered faintly under the market lights. A sealed ration pack, fresh and full, the kind given only to off-world soldiers. The widow's breath caught. The little girl's tired eyes lit up with sudden hope. But the human still didn't speak. He only looked at them, then slowly lowered the pack into view, as if offering it without words. The night market buzzed around them, but for a moment, time froze. The widow stared at the pack. Her heart raced. Was this real? Was this a trick? Why would a human care? She hesitated, torn between fear and desperate need, and the crowd, sensing something strange, began to whisper again, this time about the human. What is he doing? A human helping an alien widow? Impossible, dangerous, foolish. The widow's lips trembled, her hands shaking as she pulled her daughter closer. She had nothing left to give, nothing left to lose. And now, before her, stood a stranger who might change everything. The cold night pressed in, the whispers grew louder, and the widow's choice hung heavy in the air. Would she take the risk? Or would she turn away and let hunger win again? The story of her fate was about to begin. The little girl held the stale, bread tightly in her hands, eating it as if it were a feast. Crumbs stuck to her lips, her small fingers trembling as she tried not to drop even a piece. Hunger had carved lines on her young face, lines that no child should carry. She chewed fast, her eyes wide and desperate, like a starving animal afraid someone might snatch the food away. The widow watched her daughter, both heartbroken and relieved. At least tonight her child's stomach was not empty. But the sight also reminded her of the truth. This was only a moment of relief. Tomorrow hunger would return, sharper and crueler than before. And tomorrow, she had nothing left to sell. No scarf, no shoes, no dignity. Nothing. The market around them kept moving, its colors and noises clashing against the widow's silence. Merchants shouted, buyers haggled, guards laughed as they pushed the weak aside. Yet, in the middle of all this noise, the little girl's chewing seemed the loudest sound in her mother's ears. Every bite felt like a reminder of how far they had fallen. The crowd did not stay silent either. They whispered louder now. Some pitied, some mocked, and some only sneered. See how she devours it like a beast. Her mother stripped herself for crumbs. Shameful. Humans should not waste their eyes on such filth. The widow lowered her head, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. But her daughter lifted her eyes for a moment. The child's gaze was different, full of raw hunger and innocence, yet also fear. Those hungry eyes seemed to scream, "Why must we live like this, Mama? Why are we always starving?" The widow could not answer that silent question. She only stroked her daughter's hair and whispered, "Eat, little star. Eat and be strong." From the shadows, the human traveler watched, his eyes locked on the girl, on the way she guarded the bread as if it were treasure. He had seen battlefields, seen soldiers crawl through mud for a crust of food. But this was not war, this was supposed to be peace. Yet here was a child, thin as a twig, eating as though the world might steal her last bite. His chest tightened. His hand gripped the ration pack in his coat. Still, he waited. He knew what would happen the moment. He stepped in. Whispers would become shouts and eyes would turn on him. A human helping an alien widow was not kindness in Zareth. It was a scandal, a danger. The girl finished the bread quickly. Her small stomach, though slightly filled, still growled for more. She licked her fingers, then looked around as if hoping more crumbs might appear. Her eyes shone with a painful mixture of hope and despair. Hungry eyes, still searching. The widow saw it too. Her heart twisted. She knew one small piece of bread could never be enough. She pulled her daughter close, whispering comfort, though her voice cracked. Tomorrow we will find more." But she knew it was a lie. Tomorrow she had nothing left. At that moment, a heavy step echoed on the dirt ground. The widow stiffened. She turned quickly, shielding her daughter behind her, The human had stepped forward. The market noticed instantly. All heads turned. Whispers grew sharp like knives. A human? What does he want with her? Dangerous. Foolish. The human stopped a few feet away. His tall frame cast a shadow over the widow and child. Slowly he pulled out the ration pack, holding it where both could see. The widow's breath caught. The little girl's hungry eyes locked onto the pack, so bright, so full of desperate longing that her mother's chest ached. The child reached forward instinctively, her tiny hand trembling, but the widow caught her wrist. "No," she whispered sharply. She looked up at the human, her face pale but strong. "We are not beggars." The human said nothing. His eyes were calm, steady, but unyielding. He extended the pack closer, the gesture firm but not forceful. The widow's pride burned inside her. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, to keep the last shred of dignity she still had. But behind her, she felt her daughter's small hand shaking. The girl's eyes were locked on the food, wide, desperate, begging without words, hungry eyes that tore at the mother's soul. The human finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "This is not charity. This is an offer. Help me with small tasks. In return, your child will eat. Every day." The widow froze. A bargain? Not pity, but a trade? She looked at him suspiciously. Humans were known for clever traps. Was this one of them? The girl tugged on her arm, whispering with a dry throat, "Mama, please." The widow's heart cracked. She could resist insults, hunger, even shame. But she could not resist her daughter's voice, her daughter's hungry eyes begging for life. She looked at the human again. His face was calm, serious, not mocking like the merchant's. There was something in his gaze, not greed, not cruelty, but a strange kind of weight. A promise. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Was it safe? Was it wise? Could she trust a stranger of another world? The crowd leaned in, eager for drama. Some expected her to fall to her knees. Others expected her to spit in his face. But the widow stayed, still trembling, her arms holding her daughter tightly. Between her pride and her daughter's life, she knew the decision would shape everything that came after. The ration pack stayed in the human's hand. The child's eyes stayed locked on it, bright with hunger and hope. And the widow stood frozen, trapped between fear and love. The night market waited for her answer. The widow stood frozen in the night market, her arms wrapped around her daughter. The human's offer hung heavy in the cold air. Around them, whispers buzzed like angry insects, each voice adding pressure to her decision. Look at her. Will she sell herself now? She already gave her clothes. What's next? Human's deal is never clean. The widow's heart pounded. She was not a fool. Deals in Zareth often came with hidden chains, and humans were strangers in this part of the galaxy. Yet as she looked down, she saw her daughter's wide eyes staring at the ration pack. Eyes full of hunger, hope, and silent pleading. The human's voice cut through the noise, calm, steady, different from the merchant's. You work, I pay, nothing more. The widow's lips trembled. Work? What work? Small things, the human answered simply. Clean, cook, help me carry. In return, food, not just crumbs. Enough. Her breath caught. Food enough for her child, every day? The idea was almost impossible to believe. For months she had fought to keep her daughter alive with scraps. Could this stranger truly mean what he said? She narrowed her eyes, suspicious. And what do you gain? Why me? The human didn't flinch. His eyes stayed on hers, serious and heavy. Because I watched you. You sold everything for her. Even your last cloth. That means I can trust you. You will not run. You will not waste. The widow's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not since her husband's death. Not since the debts and the mockery. Everyone else had seen her as a burden. But this man, he saw something else. Still, fear gnawed at her. Trusting him could save her daughter or destroy her. Her daughter tugged at her arm again, whispering, "Mama, please say yes." The girl's voice cracked with hunger, too weak to sound like a demand, too desperate to hide her need. The widow's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She turned away from the human, clutching her daughter. Her mind raced with doubt. If she agreed, the whole colony would brand her as property of a human. They would spit on her, mock her louder. But if she refused, her child would starve. The human did not push her. He only stood, ration pack in hand, silent, patient. At last, the widow's whisper slipped from her lips. "One night, nothing more. If you lie, if you hurt her, I will take her and run." The human gave a small nod, his face unreadable. "One night, and if I keep my word?" The widow swallowed hard. "Then, we will see." The deal was struck. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Some laughed cruelly, some cursed, and some only watched with hungry curiosity. To them this was scandal, entertainment, a human buying loyalty with food. They would spread rumors by morning, twisting the truth into poison. The human ignored them. He handed the ration pack to the little girl. She clutched it as if it were gold, her eyes shining. Her small fingers tore it open, and for the first time in months she tasted real food, warm, rich, full of flavor. Her tears fell freely as she ate, unable to stop. The widow's throat tightened at the sight. Her daughter's hungry eyes softened, finally filled with more than crumbs. That alone almost broke her resolve. For that moment, she wanted to believe this bargain could be real. The human gestured toward the edge of the market. "Come, before they grow bolder." The widow hesitated, but the crowd's stares pressed against her back like knives. She knew, if she stayed, someone might try to take the food from her daughter. She had no strength left to fight them, so she took her girl's hand and followed the human. Every step through the market was heavy with shame and fear. She heard the whispers following her like shadows. She belongs to him now. A widow, sold for rations. She will regret it. But the human walked tall, unbothered. His silence was a shield against the venom of the crowd. At the edge of the market, the cold wind grew stronger, but the noise faded. The widow pulled her ragged shawl tighter around her, though it barely covered her shoulders. She finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? You could walk away, you don't know us." The human paused. His gaze drifted to the child, still clutching the half-eaten ration with sleepy eyes. His jaw tightened before he answered. "Because no one should look that hungry, not a child." The widow blinked, stunned by the simplicity of his answer. No hidden motives, no mockery, no greed. Just words that sounded human. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, she wanted to. As the three of them disappeared into the dark streets beyond the market, the bargain bound them together, fragile, uncertain, but real. And in the silence of the night, the widow realized something strange. For the first time since her husband's death, she did not feel completely alone. The next morning, the market of Zareth was alive again. Merchants shouted prices, customers argued, guards stomped their boots to keep order. But beneath the usual noise, another sound stirred, a wave of whispers spreading from one stall to the next. "Did you hear?" The widow left with a human. "They say she sold herself for rations." Shameful, disgraceful. The story grew as it traveled. Some said the human bought her outright. Others claimed he had claimed her child as payment. By the time the rumor reached the far end of the market, the tale had twisted into something darker, that the widow had chosen to serve the human as his property. The widow herself walked through the market quietly, her daughter's small hand clutched tightly in her own. She had returned only to fetch water. Her head was low, her shoulders bare from the cloth she had traded away. Every glance burned against her skin. Every whisper cut deeper than a blade. Her daughter looked up at her with innocent eyes, unaware of the poison in the air. The girl carried a piece of fruit the human had given her that morning, biting into it with joy. For her, life already felt brighter. But the widow's heart was heavy. She could feel the stares pressing down on them, accusing, mocking. Two merchants sneered as she passed. One muttered loud enough for her to hear, "Better to starve than crawl to a human." The other chuckled. "She's no widow now. She belongs to him." Her cheeks burned. She wanted to shout back, to defend herself, to say it was not what they thought, but her voice stuck in her throat. She knew the truth. Words would not change their minds. In their eyes she was already marked. Still she walked on. For her daughter's sake she had no choice. From a corner stall, a group of rough-looking aliens leaned against crates watching her closely. Their eyes were sharp, calculating. One of them whispered, "If a human feeds her, maybe he feeds more. Maybe he has stores of rations." Another grinned. "We could take it. No human walks safe in Zareth." The widow felt their stares like knives in her back. Her grip on her daughter's hand tightened. Fear crawled through her chest. She knew those kinds of men, debt collectors, thieves, bullies. They smelled weakness and they had found her again. She quickened her pace, heart racing. Her daughter noticed, frowning. "Mama, why are we walking so fast?" The widow forced a smile. "Because we must hurry, little star." They reached at the edge of the market. As she bent down to fill a jug, more whispers drifted around her. Women shook their heads, muttering that she had betrayed her people. Men spat on the ground as she passed. No one dared touch her yet, but the wall of hatred was building. The human arrived then, his tall frame cutting through the crowd. He carried supplies, grain sacks, and tools balanced easily on his shoulders. His calm presence drew stares and the whispers doubled in volume. Look at him, walking with her as if she is his. Disgusting. A human among us. He should leave before trouble comes. The widow's face burned with shame as he approached. She hated how the eyes of the crowd tied them together, twisting everything into something ugly. But the human seemed unbothered. He set the sacks down, lifted the water jug from her hands, and carried it without a word. The little girl smiled brightly, happy to see him. She tugged at his sleeve and showed him the half-eaten fruit. "Look, I saved some. For later," she said proudly. The human gave a faint smile and nodded. "Good. You'll need your strength." The widow's chest tightened again. His kindness was steady, simple, but dangerous. Every act of help painted her deeper in the colors of gossip. As they walked together through the market, the stares followed them. The crowd parted like water, not out of respect but out of disgust. Some spat on the ground as they passed. Others muttered curses. A few, bold enough, shouted, "Go back to your own kind, human. Take your pet widow and leave us." The widow's heart pounded. Her daughter pressed close to her leg, frightened by the anger in the voices. The human stopped walking. His calm eyes swept the crowd. He said nothing, but the silence in his gaze was heavy. The shouters faltered, suddenly unsure. There was something in him that did not bend. Something that warned of danger, quiet but sharp. The widow swallowed hard, torn between fear and gratitude. She whispered, "They will not stop. Every day will be worse." The human finally spoke, his voice low, steady. "Let them whisper. Let them shout. They cannot feed you. They cannot save her." His eyes flicked to the little girl. "I can." Her breath caught. His words struck deep. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust. But trust was dangerous, and whispers could turn into stones. Still, as they left the market behind, the widow realized something strange. For all the shame and fear pressing down on her, her daughter's small hand was warm, her stomach full, her steps lighter. And as much as the whispers hurt, there was one truth she could not deny. Life had already begun to change. But she knew the whispers were only the beginning. Soon the anger in those voices would take shape, and when it did, the real danger would come. The widow had never stepped inside a human's home before. She followed cautiously, her daughter's hand in hers while the tall stranger pushed open the heavy metal door. The hinges groaned, and the smell of oil and fire greeted her nose. Inside, the room was plain but solid. Strong walls of metal, patched but secure. A small fire burned in a corner heater, filling the space with warm air. Simple tools and supplies were stacked neatly along the walls. Sacks of grain, water containers, repair kits, and strange human devices she did not understand. For the widow, it felt like stepping into another world. Her daughter's eyes widened with wonder. She let go of her mother's hand and ran to the fire, holding out her small palms to the heat. "Mama, it's warm," she said, her voice full of joy. The widow's chest tightened. She had almost forgotten what it felt like for her child to smile like that. For so long, her daughter had only known hunger, cold, and fear. Now, in this human's shelter, she looked alive again. Still, the widow's heart was uneasy. Safety came at a price. Nothing in Zareth was free. She kept her arms crossed, watching the human carefully. He carried the water jug inside and set it down. Without a word, he took out some of the grain and began cooking over the small fire. The smell, a boiling soup, filled the room. It was simple but rich, thicker than anything the widow had tasted in months. Her daughter sniffed the air, her stomach growling loudly. The human glanced at her, then back at the pot. His face gave nothing away, but his hands moved with calm purpose, stirring carefully. When the food was ready, he set a bowl in front of the child. She grabbed it eagerly, blowing on the steam before taking her first sip. Her eyes lit up and she began to eat quickly. The widow's breath caught. She wanted to stop her daughter, to tell her not to trust so easily, but her heart softened as she saw the joy in her child's face. For once, the girl was not swallowing crumbs, she was eating real food. The human placed another bowl in front of the widow. She hesitated. Her pride told her not to touch it, not to let him think she was weak. But her body betrayed her. Her stomach growled, louder than her pride. Slowly, she lifted the bowl and took a sip. The warmth spread through her chest like fire. She had almost forgotten the taste of proper food. She closed her eyes, letting it sit on her tongue, then forced herself to set the bowl down. Her eyes lifted to the human. "Why?" she asked, her voice low. "Why are you doing this? What do you want in return?" The human looked at her calmly. "I told you already. Work, that is all. You help me. I feed you. It is fair." The widow narrowed her eyes. "No one is fair in Zareth. Everyone takes more than they give." The human's jaw tightened. His gaze drifted to the little girl, still sipping happily. His voice dropped lower. "I am not from Zareth." The widow stared at him, uncertain what to say. His words sounded simple, but the weight in his tone was heavy, almost like a warning. That night, the little girl curled up near the heater, finally full, finally warm. She fell asleep quickly, her small hand holding the edge of her mother's skirt. The widow stayed awake, her eyes never leaving the human. He sat near the door, sharpening a blade quietly. His movements were slow, precise, practiced. Every scrape of metal on stone echoed in the room. She watched him closely, suspicion burning inside her. He was strong, skilled, dangerous. If he wished, he could harm them, and no one would stop him. Was she a fool for trusting him even one night? The human suddenly spoke without looking up. "You do not need to watch me so closely. If I wanted to hurt you, I would not have fed you." Her breath caught. She turned her face away, cheeks burning. His words cut straight into her thoughts, as if he had read them. Silence filled the room again, heavy, but not hostile. The only sounds were the fire crackling and the soft breathing of her daughter. The widow pulled her daughter closer, wrapping the ragged shawl over both of them. Her heart still trembled with fear, but another feeling slowly crept in, something she had not felt in a long time. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the faint shadow of safety. The human kept sharpening his blade, his eyes sharp, always listening to the night outside. And for the first time in months, the widow allowed herself to close her eyes, not because she trusted him, but because her daughter was warm. Her daughter was fed. And for one night, the darkness outside could not reach them. But deep in her heart, she knew this peace could not last. The whispers of the market were still growing, and soon the danger would come knocking on their door. Morning came slowly to Zareth. Thin sunlight crept through the cracks in the metal roof of the human's shelter. The widow stirred awake, her daughter still curled against her, breathing softly. For one fragile moment, peace seemed possible, but peace never lasted in Zareth. A sharp knock rattled the metal door, then another, louder. The sound made the widow's heart freeze. She knew that knock. She had heard it before, when collectors came for her husband when they came after his death, when they demanded payments she could never make. The human was already on his feet. He set down the knife he had been cleaning and glanced at the door, his eyes calm but sharp. The widow pulled her daughter close, whispering urgently, "Stay quiet, don't move." A harsh voice came from outside. "Widow, we know you're in there. You think you can hide behind a human? The debt is still yours." The girl stirred, frightened, but the widow stroked her hair to keep her calm. Her chest tightened. She had prayed this day would not come so soon, but the whispers in the market had carried too fast. The collectors knew where to find her now. Eco, human, opened the door. He did not flinch as three large aliens stepped inside. Their armor was dented, their faces scarred, their eyes filled with greed. The leader, a tall brute with tusks curling from his jaw, sneered. "So it's true," he growled. "The widow hides with a human. How low she has fallen." His eyes flicked to the corner where the widow sat, clutching her daughter. "But that makes no difference. Her husband owed us. His death does not erase the debt. She pays, or we take what we want." The widow's heart pounded. She remembered the years of fear, the endless demands, the threats. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I have nothing left." The tusked alien's grin widened. "Nothing? You have a child, a fine little girl. She will cover part of the debt." The widow's blood turned to ice. She wrapped both arms around her daughter, trembling but fierce. "No, you will not touch her." The collectors laughed, a cruel sound that filled the room, but their laughter cut short when the human stepped forward, blocking their path. "She owes you nothing now," the human said flatly. His voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of stone. The tusked aliens sneered. "And who are you to say? This is our business." The human's gaze was steady. "I am the one standing between you and them." Silence fell for a moment. The collectors looked at one another, then burst into laughter again. "A human? Alone? Do you think we fear you?" The human did not answer. He only adjusted the strap of his coat, his stance shifting slightly. His hand rested near the hilt of the blade at his side. The movement was small, but it carried a promise the collectors understood. The widow's heart raced as she watched. Fear warred with hope. Could one man truly stand against these three monsters? Or would his defiance doom them all? The tusked leader snarled, stepping closer until his foul breath filled the room. "You think your blade scares us? We have broken stronger men for less. Step aside or bleed." The human's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, in one sharp motion, the human drew his blade. The sound of steel scraping free silenced the laughter. The collectors stiffened. The human's stance was not that of a merchant or a wanderer. It was the stance of someone who had fought, someone who had survived battles far worse than this. The tusked alien growled, but his eyes flickered with doubt. He raised his hand, signaling the others. They spread out, circling slowly. The widow clutched her daughter tighter, whispering prayers under her breath. Then the fight began. One of the collectors lunged, swinging a heavy club. The human sidestepped with sharp precision, his blade flashing. The club struck the wall, sending sparks flying, but the attacker stumbled as a shallow cut opened across his arm. The second came from behind, aiming to grab the human's throat. but the human spun, slamming his elbow into the alien's ribs before striking with the blade. The alien staggered back, clutching his side. The tusked leader roared, charging forward. His fists swung like hammers. The human met him head-on, steel clashing against raw strength. The room shook with their struggle, dust falling from the ceiling. The widow could only watch, her heart in her throat. She wanted to close her eyes, to shield her daughter from the sight. But she could not look away. The human fought with silence, every move controlled, every strike precise. He did not waste energy. He did not hesitate. And slowly the tide turned. The first collector lay groaning on the floor, his club discarded. The second stumbled, blood dripping from his arm. The tusked leader snarled, his breath ragged, his movements slowing. Finally, the human pressed the blade to the leader's throat. His voice was low, deadly calm. "Leave, or I finish this." The leader froze. His eyes burned with fury, but he knew the truth. This human was no ordinary wanderer. He was something far more dangerous. With a curse, he spat on the ground and raised his hand. "Enough. We're leaving." The other two staggered to their feet, and together they backed out of the shelter. Before leaving, the tusked alien glared at the widow. "This is not over. You cannot hide behind him forever." The door slammed shut. Silence filled the room again. The widow's breath came fast, her arms trembling around her daughter. She stared at the human, her mind spinning. He had fought for them, fought as if their lives mattered. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why? Why would you risk this for us?" The human wiped his blade clean, his expression steady. "Because no one else will." The widow felt tears rising, though she fought them back. For the first time, she believed him. He had no reason to risk himself, and yet he did. Her daughter looked up at the human with wide, shining eyes. "Are we safe now?" she asked softly. The human paused, then shook his head. "Not yet. They'll come back, stronger." He looked at the widow, his voice firm. "But when they do, I'll be ready." The widow held her daughter tighter, her heart torn between fear and hope. She had nothing left. No money, no possessions, no protection. But now, for the first time, she had something new. She had someone willing to stand. The shelter was silent after the fight. The widow sat on the floor, holding her daughter close. Her heart still pounded from the fear, the sound of blades and the roars of the debt collectors. The little girl clung to her mother's arms, her wide eyes full of both fear and wonder. She whispered, "Mama, he saved us." The widow looked at the human standing near the door. His blade was clean again, his shoulders straight, his breathing steady, as if the fight had been nothing more than routine. He stood like a soldier, on guard, watching the shadows outside, waiting for another knock. She did not know who he truly was or where he came from. But one truth was clear. He had risked himself for them. He had stood when no one else ever had. The widow's voice broke the silence, soft but trembling. "You should not have done that. Now they will come back, with more men. They will not. Stop until they get what they want." The human finally turned, his gaze steady. "Then let them come." The widow's chest tightened. His words were calm, but behind them was a quiet fire. He did not boast. He did not threaten. He simply spoke as if he had already chosen. He would stand, no matter the cost. Her daughter looked up at him with shining eyes. "Are you staying? With us forever?" she asked innocently. The widow's breath caught. Forever. Such a word had no place in her life anymore. She had lived from day to day, from scrap to scrap. Forever was a dream she had long abandoned. The human crouched beside the little girl, his voice softer now. "As long as you need me." The girl smiled, her small face lighting up with joy. She leaned against him, tired but comforted. The widow watched, her heart torn apart. She had nothing left to offer him. No money, no home, no family name. Not even dignity. Yet he stayed. And for the first time in years, she felt a fragile thread of hope pulling at her soul. That night, the shelter was quiet. The widow lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her daughter slept peacefully beside her, full, safe, and warm. But the widow could not rest. The debt collector's words echoed in her mind. This is not over. She turned her head slightly. The human sat by the door again, sharpening his blade, always listening to the night. She studied him silently. His face was calm, but she could see the lines of old scars on his arms. He had seen battles before. He was no ordinary traveler. She whispered into the silence, "Why do you do this? Why us? You could have walked away." The human paused, his hand stilling on the blade. For a moment, she thought he would not answer. Then quietly he said, "Because I know what it is to lose everything, and I know what it means to keep fighting anyway." Her breath caught. The weight in his voice was real, heavy with something unsaid. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes told her enough. He carried his own ghosts. Perhaps that was why he understood hers. The next day, the whispers in the market spread like fire. Everyone had heard. The debt collectors had been beaten by a human. Some mocked the collectors, others feared the human, but most spat the widow's name like a curse. She hides. Behind him. She is his property now. She betrayed her people. The widow walked quickly, head low, her daughter clutching her skirt. The whispers cut deep, sharper than knives. But something had changed. This time, she did not walk alone. The human carried the supplies beside her, his step steady, his silence a wall against the voices. When one man shouted too boldly, "Humans whore!" the human stopped, turned his head and stared. His gaze was cold as steel, sharp as a blade. The man faltered, his words choking in his throat, and he stumbled back into the crowd. The whispers softened after that. No one dared step closer. That night the widow finally understood. The whispers would never stop. The threats would never vanish. But something stronger had taken root. Hope. Her daughter laughed again, chasing sparks of firelight with her hands. The sound filled the shelter, light and pure. It had been so long since she had heard it. The widow closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her heart. She still had nothing, no money, no possessions, no safety in the eyes of her people. But she had her daughter's laughter. She had a man who stood when others turned away. She had nights with food, warmth, and the chance to dream of tomorrow. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future, not a rich one, not an easy one, but one where her daughter would live, one where they were not alone. The widow whispered into the quiet, so softly even the human did not hear. Nothing left but hope. And in that fragile hope, she found the strength to keep going.